So good evening, my name is Dilisilla. For those of you that don't know, and for those of you who are going to be catching me on the replay, my name is Dilisilla. I am your hostess with the mostest tonight. If you are married, I would suggest that you do watch this with your spouse, or if you're thinking of getting married, watch it with the person that you are with if you can, because there's a lot of stuff that I've been sharing on here that by virtue of what the different topics are and the different elements of what we've been speaking about may make it a bit difficult to be able to discuss with your spouse. But you see your girl here, ain't nothing off limits, you know. If it needs saying, it's going to get said. Okay, so good evening, good people. Lovely to have you on here. Welcome to the Speak with Dillis show. I'm going to give you a very quick recap of what it is we were speaking about. So as I mentioned briefly in the description, the first one was about couples that remain under the same roof for different reasons, whether it's financial reasons, whether it's because of the children or because of, religious reasons. They stay under the same roof knowing that they absolutely despise each other. And we were looking at how damaging that can be for, both parties. How it can also have an adverse effect on the children to whom we claim to be staying in the marriage for. So that was episode 1. There was a whole lot more that went on there. I would really encourage you to go and watch it. And then last week's one was about whether physical attraction was necessary in a marriage. And we spoke about even, some of the things that could affect a physical attraction is how we're spoken to in a relationship. And we spoke about different, love languages. I mentioned about words of affirmation, and I used myself as an example that I'm somebody that words are very powerful to me. So throwing insults and things like that is very detrimental to me. And once that happens, me being physically attracted to you, it just doesn't happen. So we were talking about those different elements, even went as far as talking about personal hygiene and about respect in a relationship. And I mentioned the fact that for me, I feel that showing respect for my partner, even taking care of personal hygiene before you even have sex, for me, was a sign of respect. So we went deep. So last week, I would really suggest that, you do go and have a listen to that episode, because it was really, really good. So we're talking about whether having a third party in a relationship, whether it can help that relationship or marriage, because we're talking about marriage specifically, whether it can help the marriage or whether it will hurt the marriage. Let's just start by saying that it is very common. And I personally have found people that I've spoken to, obviously I'm a relationship coach. And aside from that, I'm so interested in the male-female dynamic that I'm constantly observing and asking questions and learning about how the two of us, get together and how we coexist with each other. And one of the things that I found was that a lot of men specifically, or predominantly, claim having that third party within the marriage, whether occasionally, whether periodically or consistently, somehow keeps them in their marriage. Now, we've spoken a lot about marriage, about what makes marriage work, what challenges the marriage, but most importantly, what the two parties agree that they want for their marriage. Because when all is said and done, a lot of this is about consent and agreement. And the one thing I've always said about consent is consent can be withdrawn. It can be withdrawn. And sometimes people consent to things for different reasons. Within marriage, many people consent to things out of fear. Whether it's fear of being alone, whether it's fear of what the neighbors might say, whether it's fear of being a single parent, whether it's fear of social status being dropped, because there are some people that believe that being divorced is, synonymous with being accused of murder. So those reasons sometimes make people consent to what they wouldn't consent to if that element of fear was not present. Now, for the other party, I think it's pretty evident that they would be aware that their partner would be consenting to those things for those reasons. Especially when you come from a society or a culture where being married is the be-all and end-all of life. Or rather, being divorced means you're treated like an outcast. A lot of times there is a subliminal threat from the man's part to the woman that if they were to divorce, you would get the rough end of the stick. And the fact is, you would. You would if you allow yourself to. Because a lot of women put a lot of emphasis on the fact that, oh, she's a divorcee. Like, she's some Scarlet woman. I personally have never been that way inclined in terms of staying in a marriage just to maintain status or because what people might say. So that's, I'm just giving you a little bit of background as to why some people may consent to having that third party. Now, let me just go down here. When you enter into a marriage, and if you watch the first 2 episodes, and many a time when I've spoken about marriage before, the problem starts from the moment you take your vows. I will expatiate on that point. When I say the problem starts from the moment you take your vows, or maybe even a little bit before, there is no agreement between the two. I think I taught on marriage and I said that being married or marriage is not synonymous with commitment. And a lot of you are like, how can you say that? Let me tell you something. And I did explain that people get married for different reasons. So until you establish the reason for which that person got married, why they married you and why you married them, the fact that you've gotten married does not mean you tick those commitment happily ever after boxes. You don't. All you did was get married. You just acquired. That is why when people say marriage is a piece of paper, I'm saying no, those marriages are a piece of paper. My marriage wasn't a piece of paper. My parents' marriage was not a piece of paper. It depends on the agreement between the two parties. Now, the reason why we end up having these issues of living like strangers in a house, physical attraction becoming secondary in a relationship, is because there was no agreement and understanding and no consent to the other party's desires, wishes, and standards was established prior to getting married. So last week, and we're going to do a little bit of recapping as well. Last week we spoke about the fact that, when you are married, don't sleep in separate rooms when you have an argument, because what it does is it allows that argument to last a lot longer than it needs to. Because if you know that at the end of that argument, no matter how heated it is going to be, that both of you are going to have to lay in the same bed together, then it's going to force you to have to converse with each other. Let me tell you something. Get into bed naked after an argument. Trust me. Unless your husband is made of wood, pun not intended, or unless you are a wet and cold fish, at some point during the night, you will soften. And all I'm saying is, when you banish your husband to the couch, or you, the wife, decides to sleep in the spare room, what you're saying is, I know why you're laughing, keep it clean. What you're saying is, I don't have the capacity to communicate effectively. You can't afford that in a marriage. Because the one thing that marriage requires is communication. The reason why we're doing this marriage thing in part 1, part 2, part 3, ultimately, it's about communication. And it's about the fact that one party has failed in their either their desire or their effort to communicate to the other what they really want. It is an issue of honesty, because people are entering into marriages with a high level of dishonesty. That is what the issue is. We are marrying, taking vows, knowing that we have a serpent behind our back that is ready to bite the person we're marrying as and when the right conditions present itself. That is why we have the issue that we are having with marriage. This is why we'll be talking about, like I said, living under one roof and you're at loggerheads, about physical attraction, because we're not allowed, either we're not allowed to be honest or we don't like to hear the truth. The problem that we have with us women is that we don't like the truth. And because of that, men who lack integrity take great pleasure in lying. I mean, there are songs that are written about the way we want to be lied to. I don't care what you do to them or with them, just be good to me. Are you stupid? Or tell me lies, tell me sweet little lies. All those songs. All that we write about it. Why would we write about it? I'm a songwriter. You write about life because we women like to hear lies. So what it does is it also puts the weaker man, or the man that doesn't want to be labeled or be, as a bastard, we force them not to be as honest as they should be with us. Let me give you an example. So, for example, last week we spoke about whether physical attraction was necessary to keep a marriage together. And I can't remember whether I said this last week, but one of the things I had written on my notes, last week we just freestyled. What I did put in my notes was this. As a woman, the way we are physically designed, we don't have to have anything rise. We have substitutes that we can use to enable us to have sex if we are not really in the mood. Like I said, we're over the age of 18 here, or preferably 21. So I'm going to keep it real. So if a woman doesn't feel like having sex, you've got KY jelly there, or you've got other lubricants that you can use, okay? If a man doesn't want to have sex, unless Viagra will work for him, if he can't rise to the occasion, it's not happening. Though that is a fundamental difference between a man and a woman. Fundamental. For a man to get an erection, let's keep it real here. They wake up with one, okay? He's already ready. This is a man that, obviously has got no issues. So fundamentally, we women can rely on certain aids to help us to have sex if we're not in the mood. For the man, it's not the same. So hear this now. If your husband does not find you attractive, it is harder for him to sleep with you. But woe betide the husband that tells the wife what is stopping him from being attracted. He's dead meat. Because women convince themselves, and should I add myself in it? Because I don't really believe that. Women tell themselves that attraction is synonymous with love, and it is not. It is not. Because if that's the case, a man that visits prostitutes would be in love with all the women that he pays to have sex with. Attraction is not synonymous with love. It isn't. But if we want to keep, our husbands interested, then we shouldn't be afraid to ask or have that conversation. What will help you to continue to be interested? We've got to just be honest and have those conversations. But again, like I said, when you get married and you're getting married and truth was not a foundation of your marriage and you didn't marry your friend, it's very difficult to have these conversations that leave you naked, that leave you transparent. That is the problem. Monson, thank you for being honest, says, why should a woman have sex if she's not in the mood? Is that not rape? No, it's not rape, darling. What is rape is when you are forced to have sex. I'm not being funny. There are many women who you may not necessarily be in the mood, but your husband's in the mood and you have sex for that reason. So let's not get over technical, because trust me, if it was rape, believe you me, I think maybe you need to go and read up on whose show you're on. I would be the first one to point that out. So I'm talking about a marital relationship where honesty in the bedroom is required. Because when you are able to be honest in the bedroom, you find that every other part of that marriage is quite transparent. The problem that we are having is we don't want to hear the truth from our husband to say, babe, the way you've put on weight, I don't find it attractive. Then woe betide the man that will have the audacity to tell his wife that she's put on weight and he don't find it attractive. Now, these are some of the reasons why some of us, our sex life has gone downhill. Don't worry, ladies, I will get on to the men in a minute. Let me concentrate on my sisters. And all I'm saying is, when we want to keep our marital homes as they should be, just pay attention to different areas. I am not saying that by not paying attention, it is justification for your husband to go out and get a third party involved in the marriage. I'm not going there. But I'm just concentrating on the fact that these are some of the things that we can do to help keep our marital homes or our bedroom healthy. And unfortunately, because of the way we are designed, we won't have those conversations. Because I've watched many talk shows, read many articles where, people say, oh, well, it's not what's on the inside, it's on the outside. Stop lying. It's a lie. It's crap. It's rubbish. In the bedroom, let me break this down. It's not what's on the outside that counts, it's what's on the inside. That works outside of the bedroom. That works when it is, the 7-day-a-week conversation that you have, the different interactions you have with your spouse. The moment it comes to being in the bedroom, what is on the inside don't count is what's on the inside don't count is what's on the outside that counts. Can I get a witness up in here? And that is why I mentioned in one of the other episodes that when people get super spiritual about marriage, sex, and relationships in the church, it's a problem, because come nighttime, you ain't sleeping next to a spirit, you are sleeping next to flesh and blood. And if that flesh and blood don't turn you on, you are in trouble. Okay, so that's why I'm saying here you will get the truth. I don't do political correctness. I won't sit here and say, guys, don't be so shallow, love your wife, but I'm not going to tell you that because it's a lie. And it's a lie. And it doesn't help you. What we need to learn is the truth so that we can deal with the truth. So that if you're not attracted to your wife physically, try and be honest and sensitive. Being disrespectful and telling her, are you sure you want to eat that, is not helpful. It's about love and support. It's about maintaining that affection and respect whilst you're helping your wife or supporting your wife. Of course, we put on weight for different reasons. Sometimes the menopause will even make you put on weight. But all I'm saying is, let's keep it real, so that for those that it is just laziness or you just can't be bothered, that we can have these conversations so that we can, maintain our home. Because let me tell you something, the man married you. And if it's an honest marriage, you're the one that he really wants to be sleeping with. You're the one that he wants to spend his time with. You're the one he wants to be doing everything with. So allow him to be honest with you. Guys, let me tell you something. A lot of women are getting really bored in their marriages. Sexually, they are bored as hell. And I think where the older men have to start to pay attention is that your wife has needs as an older woman. The issue with us women that men don't seem to have is that we evolve a lot as we get older, as women. There is so much that goes on with us psychologically that makes us grow in a way that men don't grow. I've seen it, I've experienced it, I've witnessed it. And as men, if you don't pay attention to your wife's growth as a person, as an older woman, her attraction for you also diminishes greatly. Greatly. You see, society has taught us that we women are so desperate for marriage that in whatever state that marriage is in, we're all right with it. But that's not the truth. What we do is we find other interests. And because we find other interests, we actually don't care what you're doing. They just don't care about your life. That's just the truth. So whilst you think you're doing us a favor, she's bored. She's already out there. Not necessarily having an affair, but she has created and cultivated different interests outside the home such that you are not important anymore. And that's when you get into that cycle of two people living under one roof and they just start to get further and further and further apart. Because the moment you stop having sex, and don't get me wrong, when people say that, after a while, that depends on you, not every couple is like that. And what I would suggest you do is, if you find yourself going down that road, address it. Address it. Don't take it like, oh, well, we've been together so long, after a while the sex get boring. No. Don't allow yourself to believe that fallacy. Don't put yourself in that category, because it's not going to work for you. And that was why I was speaking about the fact that different anatomy of male and female, and it being important that the attraction element is there. Don't listen. There was one thing I learned from my mum. I'll tell you this. My mum was a housewife while she was here for many years, kind of housewife. Or whenever she was home, I always remember my mum. She would always do the cooking and everything, and she would have her shower just before my dad got home. Mum would change her clothes, she'd put on her lipstick, she'd fix her hair. It's the one thing I remember growing up, like from when I was a baby. I always saw my mum looking pristine before my dad got home from work. Some of us women need to understand that our men, yes, it's true, they are visual. I'm not saying that you have to have a face full of makeup every day if you've got a new baby. I'm not saying that. Let's keep things in context. But even when I had my child, if I was going to shower, I would just make sure that it's before the hubby got home. If it meant I'm brushing my hair, I'm putting on a bit of mascara, those things take 2 minutes. You don't have to go and get a makeup artist. They take 2 minutes. Put a bit of mascara on, a bit of Vaseline on your lips or something, and just try. Just make that effort. And it brings me on to something else that I'll speak about a bit later on. And I'm talking about all these things because when I have spoken to people and I have witnessed people's relationships, and the men have said, oh, I have an extra person in the marriage because it helps me in my marriage. That's actually what keeps us together. So my wife doesn't have to deal with the stressful parts of the relationship. Like if my wife doesn't really like sex that much, then I'm able to have this other person. Again, let's go back to the beginning. It's about agreement. Has your wife sanctioned it? Does she know? Because if you're saying it helps you. Have you taken the trouble to find out why your wife is not having sex with you? I mean, I know that we speak about some pretty deep things, and I spoke about, certain experiences some women have had, and even some of you men as well. Let's keep it real here. And it has affected the way you show up in terms of intimacy in your relationships. Same with the women. And so if you're not being, again, it comes down to, look, whichever way I turn this conversation, it comes back down to honesty and transparency and conversation. We can't get away from it. And this is why when you get married, when you're not honest, and you don't marry your friend, and you marry with an agenda, or you marry with something that you seek to gain and not give in the marriage, you'll find that you've shot yourself in the foot in many different areas. Because what should be normal and run of the mill for a normal couple, you aren't able to enjoy those things because you didn't go into it with good intentions. So you find that you're stuck. And like I said earlier on, the second greatest form of incarceration after prison is a bad marriage. The second form of the worst incarceration that you can suffer after being in like a proper, conventional prison is marriage. It is the worst thing. It can kill you and send you to an early grave real quick.
Freedom from hurt, freedom from pain. Send me sunshine.